Okay, if I could ask members leaving the chamber and those leaving the public gallery to do so as quickly and as quietly as possible as we resume business. The next item of business is a members' business debate on motion 18710 in the name of Emma Roddick on increasing frequency and intensity of wildfires. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put. I'd invite members wishing to participate in the debate to press the request to speak buttons, and I call on Emma Roddick to open the debate. Up to 7 minutes. Ms Roddick.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I want to first recognise that there is a crowd of people outside the Parliament as I speak from Climate Mass Lobby. I know that I have a number of constituents who have made the journey from the Highlands and Islands in order to have their voice heard, and while I'm in here leading what I know is a very important debate, I do want to recognise what they are doing as well and apologise that I can't be with them today. Increasing intensity and frequency of wildfires is expected given the climate change and related extreme weather events that we're seeing. I'm clear that effort is needed to tackle climate change if we want this world to remain habitable for our own species and to mitigate the impact of wildfires, flooding and other events on our infrastructure, our communities and our natural environment. The less that we do to limit our own impact on climate change, the more it is going to cost us in lives, livelihoods and financially. These are expensive events to tackle and to recover from. Overall efforts to decarbonise transport, housing, energy is not separate to what I'm about to speak to, nor is restoring biodiversity. But I will focus for the rest of my speech on the reality that regardless of what I hope becomes an escalation in efforts worldwide to address our impact on the climate, we need to get better at preventing and reacting to wildfires. I've had many constituents write to me about this. Some have been heavily and personally impacted by wildfires, and others are simply devastated at what they've witnessed, particularly at Dava Moor this summer. Fires destroyed woodland, killed thousands of animals, and reportedly could be smelled as far away from the site as Orkney. One common theme in what folk have been calling for is action against the irresponsible tourism and camping that is so often linked to these events. Even when the exact cause is not known, like at Dava, remains of glass bottles, burnt tinfoil and campsites spotted amongst the devastation infuriate locals, especially victims of the blaze. The Cairngorms National Park Authority is leading the way, with Scotland's first fire management bylaw currently waiting for sign-off from ministers, restricting open fires and barbecues. I'm glad that these steps have been taken to protect our national park, but this action is something that I and many others in the Highlands would like to see replicated across the region. The Minister has heard from me on numerous occasions about the potential for a Scotland-wide ban on disposable barbecues, particularly over the summer months, and I hope that he can lay out when he sums up any limitations on the government in doing this and what his suggested way forward is. Because it's not enough to say that the issue is complex and leave it alone. We need to take action here. If we're unsure about devolved competence, we must test that, not just abdicate responsibility. The temporary fun of a disposable barbecue is not worth the danger to life, whether humans or animals, wild or livestock, the risk to the environment or the potential damage to rural businesses and homes. As the CAO of the CMPA, Grant Moyer, told me, the recreational fires that were agreed as appropriate 25 years ago are no longer so. The risk of wildfire has increased, the intensity of them when they do catch is greater, and the incidence of uncontrolled fires, thanks to folk taking risks, is simply too high. The CNPA is doing a lot that could be replicated elsewhere and leading the way. We don't need to reinvent any wheels. Under its Climate Adaptation Fund, it has so far provided grants of over £600,000, including for fire management equipment and training for estates and contractors. With SLE, it's working to replace equipment that was damaged in the Dava fires. This building of resilience and use of existing expertise and roles based on the ground where the wildfires will take place will undoubtedly support faster and more effective reaction when fires are spotted. Another frequent issue raised with me is that of helicopters and who should have easy access to one. Amongst the various suggestions made are that Nature Scot is not quick enough to react, as landowner insurance can cause issues. Given the risks in allowing fires to spread, looking at how the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service can more quickly and reliably get access to helicopter support in tackling blazes seems overdue. Scottish Land and Estates has suggested that the fire service should have its own helicopter capabilities. A constituent of mine suggested this should sit with Nature Scot, and another in discussion told me it really doesn't matter. Whoever can react should be given the resources to do so now. Management of fuel load, of course, comes up frequently too, and I hope that the Minister will respond to demands from gamekeepers on ensuring that Muirburn licences are attainable to help with wildfire prevention. Mutual aid provided by land managers in a crisis is invaluable. These are people who know the land, know the access, know the risk factors involved. As the Government responds to cross-party calls today for more action on this, they will need to include those voices in plans and policies. I'm not one for calling for action plans, strategies or other government synonyms, but the lack of a Scottish wildfire plan does seem to be a screaming gap, given the massive coordination between authorities that is needed to manage both the risk and active incidents. The kit available to fire services to tackle wildfires must be considered in the context of working with other people on the ground. Both parties should be part of those needed discussions on what further SFRS equipment could be helpful and complementary to local efforts. I've already shared the suggestion of one constituent with Government that we need more data and strong evidence about the land use and vegetation that was on the ground at the time that a wildfire caught and spread. Knowing more about this reality rather than different sectors pointing fingers at each other would be invaluable. Now, even my generous 7 minutes today isn't long enough to cover all the points raised by stakeholders reacting to today's debate, but I do look forward to hearing everyone else's contributions. This is one of the largest volumes of correspondence that I've had about a Members' Business debate. Now, my excellent motion drafting skills might have played a part in that, but I suspect the bigger reason is the genuine and deep-rooted willingness from people on the ground, gamekeepers, NGOs, the public, organisations and lobby groups to play their part in wildlife prevention and tackling incidents. The Scottish Government has access to a wealth of knowledge, experience and volunteer willingness out there to grab hold of to tackle the increasing intensity and frequency of wildfires. And I hope that that is sincerely and enthusiastically made use of, and that the cross-party consensus I hope we're about to hear results in real concentrated action. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Roddick. Just to advise the Chamber, there is an awful lot of interest in speaking. I am keen to ensure that everybody that has requested to speak has an opportunity to do so and for the 4 minutes, but they will need to stick to the 4 minutes, even with the motion without notice to extend the time, which I confidently predict will be necessary. With that, I call first Finlay Carson, to be followed by Emma Harper. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It's refreshing to have a debate on a burning issue that truly matters to communities across Scotland, rather than the recent focus on foreign policy and constitutional wrangling. But puns apart, this is a very serious issue. The increasing frequency and intensity of wildfires in Scotland, and including in my own constituency of Galloway and West Dumfries, is deeply alarming. These fires are no longer rare events. They're becoming a growing threat to people, property and our natural environment. And I thank Emma Roddick for bringing this important debate to the Chamber. It's an issue that demands urgent action from the SNP government, not another case of it being kicked into the long grass. Traditionally in Dumfries and Galloway, the peak fire season runs from early March for around 12 weeks. Yet this year we saw 10 fire alerts between the 13th of January and the 15th of September, an unusually high figure compared to the previous years going back to 2012. An FOI request revealed that Scotland has suffered 1,574 wildfires in the last decade. Alarmingly, this figure has already seen more wildfires than any other full year except 2017 and 18. These figures, drawn from the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service data, coincide with periods of historically high temperatures, something confirmed by weather forecasters' records. Over the same period, Scotland has increased tree cover, reduced grazing by sheep and deer, and seen fewer hectares of upland under active management through prescribed burning. These changes, while some believe are well-intentioned, have undeniably contributed to the problem. The threat is not only to human life but also to wildlife in our countryside, where the loss of tree cover has been dramatic. Sorry, I don't have time. In early April, a major wildfire in Galloway forced people and properties to be evacuated. Emergency services, supported by helicopters, battled a blaze that stretched several miles wide at its peak. However, amid the crisis, the response from volunteers and local organisations was nothing short of extraordinary. The Galloway Mountain Rescue Team worked tirelessly around the clock, evacuating campers from danger zones, often in the dead of night. Using advanced tools such as drones for thermal imaging, they provided critical intelligence to the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service and even coordinated the Rescue 199 from Prestwick to airlift people to safety. Their efforts undoubtedly saved lives and prevented tragedy. We must also commend the Glentrool Hive community volunteers who provided food, shelter and welfare support to exhausted responders during the height of the emergency. Their support and resilience was a lifeline for those on the front lines. Local farmers and land-based businesses also stepped up, supplying water bowsers, ATVs and manpower to help contain the fire. This collaboration between emergency services, rural business and volunteers demonstrates the very best of community spirit in the face of adversity. While public behaviour is a fact, the SNP government cannot ignore its responsibility to ensure our communities are better prepared. That means listening to those with first-hand experience, and that's the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, rather than ignoring their warnings. Earlier this year, I called on the First Minister to listen and take action. Instead, he ignored my calls and blamed those for not supporting his budget. That was far from an acceptable response. But regrettably, the First Minister seems determined to press ahead with savage cuts that will close fire stations in many rural areas and cost jobs. This will inevitably increase response times and put lives at risk. The Fire Brigade Union has been clear there must be no further cuts. Deputy Presiding Officer, if the SNP government is serious about protecting the public from wildfires and other emergencies, it must act now. That means proper funding of our fire service, listening to the expert advice and support from voluntary and rural sectors. Finally, I once again want to put on record my heartfelt thanks to the Galloway Mountain Rescue Team and the Glentrool Hive volunteers and the many local farmers and businesses who gave of their time to protect lives and livestock.
Thank you, Mr Carson. I now call Emma Harper to be followed by Rhoda Grant. Up to 4 minutes. Ms Harper.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I thank Emma Roddick for bringing this debate to Parliament today? I know her region was hit hard with the biggest wildfire this summer around Dava, causing massive devastation in an area of great beauty and natural resource. Parts of my South Scotland region were sadly hit hard also. April saw one of the biggest wildfires in living memory in Galloway. 17,000 acres of moor and forest were destroyed around Glentrool in a fire lasting several days, and the after effects of which are still being seen in the community and will be seen for many years to come. That is nearly the entire surface area of Loch Lomond, that's 17,000 acres, ablaze and alight and now almost bereft of life. Thankfully, like other wildfires in Scotland, there was no fatalities or serious injuries, at least among human beings, but I am also concerned about the wildlife. It may only be a matter of time before someone is seriously injured or killed in a wildfire. At Glentrool, hikers were evacuated from hills by emergency services and campers were told to locate a place of safety. I fear that at some point in the future we will be reading reports of the death of someone who couldn't be reached in time and suffered a terrible fate. We must do all we can to prevent that becoming reality. We saw just how hard our emergency and response services worked. I want to again place on record my thanks to the Fire and Rescue Service, the police and the Galloway Mountain Rescue Team for their supreme dedication, their work and bravery in helping tackle the Glentrool fire, and of course the local people at the Glentrool Hive, as Finlay Carson has mentioned as well. They have worked incredibly hard under stressful and difficult threatening situations, supporting emergency responders, thrown open the doors to the Hive and in the middle of the night, and making sure that those tackling the fire could get some rest, refuel and necessary internet access. Some years ago, we saw issues with sky lanterns being launched and landing miles away, risking wildfire and damage to property and livestock. Thankfully, the use of these things seems to have died down, but in many ways it's more disheartening that the wildfires we now see are almost certainly caused in situ, where those responsible, even if by accident, can see for themselves the landscape and the environment that their actions can destroy. I am proud we have some of the best and open access legislation in the world. In contrast to the hugely restrictive regime across the border, for example, we have a framework that allows people to enjoy our land freely and without unnecessary restrictions. But we also have to face the fact that a small minority of people exercising those rights are doing so irresponsibly and putting locals, their livelihoods and their environment at huge risk. We can't say for certain what caused the Galloway wildfires. Finding a needle in a haystack is impossibly tricky when that haystack is 17,000 acres. But our fire and rescue service are clear. Most of them are started by human activity. To me, that means educating anyone accessing our world-class countryside of the devastating, irresponsible use of those access rights that can have on our communities. Climate change is here, and as we have to adjust our way of living and around working to that reality. And as Ms Roddick mentioned, there is a climate change mass rally at Dynamic Earth right now, which I was hoping to be at today as well. One action to take has to be given the prevention of wildfires a higher priority across public policy. And I hope Emma Roddick's debate and the contributions from around the Chamber today are playing a part in informing the Government's thinking on how to, as far as possible, prevent these disasters from happening again.
Thank you, Ms Harper. I now call Rhoda Grant to be followed by Fergus Ewing. Up to 4 minutes. Ms Grant.
For years, the Fire Brigades Union has been raising the alarm. The Scottish Government has been warned that there has to be proper plans in place to deal with wildfires and the necessary resources to support them. The increase in wildfires is due to climate change and changes in heather moor management, and we need urgent climate action if we're to properly protect life and property from wildfires. And the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service needs significant investment. This means more firefighters, better equipped and trained, along with better planning, research and coordination. The head of the service, instead of fighting for proper investment for the service that they have presided over, and in some cases recommended unprecedented cuts to frontline resources. Understaffing has been so bad that throughout the last period of wildfires, nearly all fire and rescue services have been most severely affected. In areas, the call-up of off-duty firefighters where they've been asked to work extra shifts. The fire engines have sat in stations because there's not enough people to crew them in such circumstances. Fire Brigade Union members have worked to exhaustion. I've lodged a series of parliamentary questions seeking information on the current state of the service in the Highlands and Islands constituency, and I was alarmed to learn that 125 on-call fire stations, of the 125 on-call fire stations, there are only 10 with a full team. That's less than 10%. And in more rural areas in my constituencies, this is exacerbated by many volunteers not working locally during the day, reducing the cover even further. I had confirmed that the SFRS had lost more than 1,200 firefighters since the SNP came into power in 2007. This is currently operating with a 29% vacancy rate, and it's no wonder that the service is under so much pressure. The firefighters are asked to place themselves at risk without the necessary kit, expected to work on hillsides with the same gear that they use to enter burning buildings. The physical stress puts this workforce at extreme risk. Since the creation of SFRS on the 1st of April 2013, the Fire and Rescue Service in Scotland has suffered tens of millions of pounds of real-term cuts. Plain facts are, since 2012-13, the year before it was created, to 2023-24, there has been a reduction of over 1,250 firefighters in Scotland. Over a sixth of the total workforce reduced in that time. Of those 1,250 jobs lost, 729 were whole-time firefighters and a further 368 were retained operational firefighters. These are direct cuts to frontline services. The resource budget set up for SFRS in 25-26 was £332.1 million, of which is a 56 million real terms cut in a 12-year period since the service was formed. Since sustained underinvestment is really creating problems with an 800 million capital backlog, Presiding Officer, we have to be grateful to the gamekeepers and others who came to the aid of the service, but we should not have to depend on the general public to prop up our service.
Thank you, Ms Grant. I now call Fergus Ewing to be followed by Edward Mountain. Up to 4 minutes. Mr Ewing.
On the 28th of June, several wildfires raged, covering the area, including Dava, Lochindarb and Carbridge, all in my constituency. It was the largest wildfire, Presiding Officer, recorded in Scotland's history, covering an area of around 40 square miles, half the size of the city of Edinburgh. A wildfire which occurred in Caithness in the Flow Country a couple of years back was estimated to produce 700,000 tonnes of CO2. That was half the area of this fire, and therefore it can safely be assumed that the carbon emissions from this fire were well over 1 million. To put that in perspective, the reduction in carbon achieved in Scotland between 22 and 23 was 0.9 million tonnes in total. And therefore this fire has created more of a problem for the environment than everything else we've been able to do for a whole year in Scotland. Now, I don't know why the Scottish Government haven't said this, nor do I know why residents in Dava, to whom I've spoken, some of them, had no information whatsoever. None. No advice, no information about whether they should evacuate their homes as fires approached it from both sides of their homes. The lady I spoke to doesn't want to speak out or her name identified. There was also an elderly labourer of 82. Their families had to help. They had no help. They got no advice. They asked for advice. People were nice, but they couldn't say anything. The headquarters down the road in Granton didn't go and see them. The day after the fire began, I asked the ministers if they would hold a SCORE meeting. They should have. They didn't. Why not? Surely this was... I'm very sorry. I'm happy to discuss this at a meeting. I have to cover... I've got 4 minutes. I'm very sorry, Minister. Normally I take interventions, as you know. There's a huge number of things we have to do. But because of the plethora of public bodies involved, the Scottish Fire Service, CNPA, Nature Scot, Forest and Land Management, who apparently don't allow their employees even to tackle fires on their own property, which is absurd. But because there's so many public bodies involved, I do think that an independent review is required. Otherwise, bodies, I'm afraid to say, they just mark their own homework. Yes, lots of them do good things. That's been said by some. But collectively, there is no plan. And I raised this at GQ today. Areas where there's one road in, one road out, such as Glenmore from Aviemore to Cairngorm, such as Drimmen to Rowerden for Ben Lomond, and I've lived in both areas, so I know this, 3,000 visitors a day. If there's a fire, people will go back where they came. They will die in their cars with smoke inhalation. That's where people die. It's not because of the fire, it's panic and smoke inhalation. So there's no plan there at all. No plan. Now, there's lots of things that we require, and I haven't got time to go through them all. Aerial cover, more training, plans to be implemented by individual estates. But essentially, there is no rural wildfire service in Scotland. There's no public service. It's run by landowners, and goodness me, the fire service contributed, but they've got limited hours that they work. They don't, I believe, work in the evening or on moorland. So it's up to the keepers under attack from legislation so pernicious that they're trying to get rid of field sports altogether. Without the keepers and without controlled Muirburn, Presiding Officer, we ain't seen nothing yet in terms of wildfires in Scotland, and I hope the Scottish Government will get a close grip on this issue, which is the most immediate threat to rural Scotland.
Thank you, Mr Ewing. I now call Edward Mountain to be followed by Ariane Burgess. Again, up to 4 minutes. Mr Mountain.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. And I just remind members of my register of interest that I'm involved in a family farming partnership in Murray. I would like to thank Emma Roddick for bringing this debate to the Chamber today. If it's done nothing else, it's held the Minister's feet to the fire to respond to a request I put in on the 8th of August for a meeting for my constituents and Mr Ewing's constituents and other regional constituents to discuss this. I found out today he was unable to attend because he'd accepted a later request by another MSP. Not good enough, Minister, and I will be making a complaint, Presiding Officer, through the correct channels. Can I just say, when it comes to wildfires, I have some experience, having fought plenty of them in my time. They do happen in remote areas, and it is really difficult to fight them, and you require, in many cases, access from specialist vehicles to get to them. And that's what the fire brigade need, and that's what keepers and estates often supply. I'd also make the point that Mr Ewing has made, or reiterate the point, that firefighting of Muirburn fires or wildfires is often best done at night when the wind is low and there is a heavy dew. And that is the time when some of the fire service are unable to attend. And it's certainly the time that keepers go out and fight these fires. I remember one up in Tongue, which we fought for 5 days, successfully putting it out at 4 o'clock in the morning, having fought it every single day and night during that period, taking 2 hours off to rest. And it is that specialist knowledge that neighbours provide. And I want to just draw attention to the example and to make it really personal in relation to one contractor, Stephen Shand, who stopped everything. He didn't work on the estates. He just moved his equipment up to where the fire was and started fighting it. He had no indication that he was going to get paid for it. He had no worry about that. What he was trying to do was fight the fire because it was on a neighbour's land. And we rely on that, and it's really important. And the Parliament should acknowledge the effort that people make. Now, I want to mention about fuel load, because fuel load is critical. And as we get more and more wind farms across Scotland, it's very difficult to manage the fuel load under the wind farms. And when we go into the peatland grant schemes, there is a particular difficulty of managing it there. Because what has happened is this Parliament, who believes it knows better than the people on the ground, has dictated how Muirburn and managing Muirland should be carried out. And I'm afraid, after some nearly 30 years of experience of doing that, I find some of the decisions they've made completely bizarre. I also think that we need to consider, and I know I'm very short of time, is what we do in regards to woodland grant schemes. When I was driving across the Dover Moor the other day by Lochindorb, I noticed all the trees burnt, all part of a woodland grant scheme. They'll all have to be replaced. Now, who's going to bear the cost of that? Why should it be the landowner? Because they didn't start the fire. There was nothing that they could do. And no one will be able to attribute that cost or the reason why it started to any individual, so it needs insurance. And we need to make sure, Minister, when the government is drawing up these schemes for woodland grant schemes and peatland restoration schemes, that insurance forms part of it. Now, I would just say also that retained crews across the Highland lack the equipment. Some of the retained crews don't even have showers at their stations, so they can be fighting fires all day and not even to be able to get a shower to get home before they go home. Now, finally, I'd like to say, Minister, and if I could, briefly within the time, is we need more assets. The government has got to draw together assets such as Argo Cats and systems behind them. They need to have the ability to call on helicopters. And I strongly believe, given the prevalence of wildfires across the UK, there should be an aircraft which is capable of bombing fires, which is available to both governments. And I urge the Scottish Government to
call Ariane Burgess to be
that.
followed by Ben McPherson.
For years, I've travelled across the Dava Moor, making my way to the Cairngorms, Kingussie and on south and west. Nothing prepared me for the devastation I encountered when I came over the brow of the hill on the moor this summer. Everywhere I looked, the land was black and charred, and as I drove, it went on and on. Trees burned, whole hillsides ravaged by wildfire. Earlier this summer, from the top of Culmore, I watched the fire on the side of Stack Polly unfold in great yellow smoke clouds. In the aftermath of the Cannock wildfires, I met with people who were on the ground to understand the extent and the impacts. I followed up with visits to Inverness Fire Station to discuss the challenges our fire and rescue teams face and what resources they need. I'm also working with constituents who were traumatised by the lack of communication when the fires came so close to their homes this summer. Wildfires are no longer rare, and I am grateful that Emma Roddick has brought this to the Chamber. Their frequency and intensity are increasing, driven by climate change, human activity and land management. And the Highlands are especially vulnerable to due to extensive peatlands, open moorland and remoteness. Communities, living landscapes and emergency services are bearing the brunt. The environmental costs are staggering. Peatlands that should be locking in carbon instead go up in smoke, releasing vast amounts of greenhouse gases. One fire in the Flow Country released 700,000 tonnes of CO2 in 6 days, doubling Scotland's emissions for that period. Fire strips hillsides bare, destroys habitats and undermines our climate targets. Healthy ecosystems are our greatest defence. Re-wetted peatlands and restored native woodlands are far more fire-resistant than degraded moorland dominated by heather. Healthy soils also hold more water, slowing the spread of flames. Where natural processes are restored, resilience increases. In North America, wetlands created by beavers have acted as natural fire breaks. We must be honest about land management. I don't have time. Muir burn is often claimed as a prevention tool, but evidence shows it's frequently the cause of wildfires getting out of control. We should not conflate muir burn with other fire management techniques, like creating fire breaks or tactical burning during an emergency, which are very different in practice and risk. If we're serious about prevention, we must confront the reality that large-scale burning of moorland is adding to, not reducing, the danger. And this connects directly to climate change. As our summers become hotter and drier, the risks multiply. And that makes it urgent that the causes of every wildfire are properly investigated and publicly reported, so we can learn, adapt and prevent repeat incidents. Prevention is also about behaviour. Disposable barbecues are a known risk. A constituent of mine told me of flames burning from a bin in a forestry car park. Inside were 3 still smouldering disposable barbecues. That's a fire waiting to happen. It's time to consider banning disposable barbecues altogether. Meanwhile, rural fire crews, often on-call volunteers, are stretched to their limits. Communities step up, but they cannot be the last line of defence. We need a national strategy that joins up land use, climate action, biodiversity restoration and emergency response. Let's not forget the public. Expanding the reach of the Scottish Outdoor Access Code, increasing countryside rangers and ensuring people understand their responsibilities outdoors are all essential. And this is not only about how we respond to fires once they are raging, but how we build landscapes and communities that are resilient in the first place.
Thank you. I now call Ben McPherson to be followed by Tim Eagle. Up to 4 minutes, Mr McPherson.
Tackling climate change internationally is something I've been passionate about, like many others, but way before it became common view. But it's a global challenge, and although we need to think global and act local, the reality is, in terms of the numbers, and we have to accept this, in Scotland we have very little ability internationally to tackle climate change. We are such a small contributor, and because of past emissions and what other countries are emitting at the present, the ability for us as a small country to affect international climate change is small. Yes, we should play our part. Yes, we should do our bit. Yes, new technologies that we are leading on can make an impact beyond our shores. But our ability to actually affect the cessation of global climate change or the reduction of global climate change is limited, and we have to accept that fact, unfortunately. And therefore, no matter what we do, it is likely that, as we've seen in recent years, that climate change is going to happen to us because of the international situation. And while we should raise our voices to urge for more action internationally, we also need to think much, much more about adaptation and mitigation. We saw a shift in terms of resources and focus towards that in the last budget, and I welcome that. And we saw investment in net zero, which has other benefits as well as reducing emissions, for example, creating warmer homes, more breathable air. These are all things that are worth doing, of course, facilitating greater use and development of renewable energy. But we need to think in the long term more about adaptation and mitigation, and that is why this debate is really important. This matters in terms of flooding as well as wildfires, and of course the devastating impact of wildfires has been seen this summer, and we're all afraid and should be acting on the proposition that it's likely to happen more often as we see warmer and warmer weather. The motion focuses on the Highlands, understandably, but this has also affected us here in the capital city. In fact, very, very close to where we are now, at Arthur Seat, and that has happened more and more. And yes, there needs to be action on prevention and education and minimising risk of these fires happening. But we also need to have adequate resource to respond. And that's why the capacity of the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service matters so much. Now, the service delivery review that's taking place at the moment is important, and we do need to think how resources are allocated strategically and effectively. But I have to say, as a local MSP, I'm really concerned about the proposal to close Marienville Fire Station. It is the closest to Arthur Seat, or certainly one of the closest. And in a city that is growing, where risk is growing, we, as a society, as a democracy, and the government, we need to be thinking about long-term capacity building, not capacity reduction, and certainly not here in our growing capital city.
Thank you very much. Before calling the next speaker, I'm conscious of the number of members who still want to participate in the debate, so I'm minded to accept a motion without notice under Rule 8.14.3 to extend the debate by up to 30 minutes and invite Emma Roddick to move such a motion. Question is that the debate be extended by up to 30 minutes. Are we all agreed? That is agreed. I call next Tim Eagle, to be followed by Jackie Dunbar. Up to 4 minutes. Mr Eagle.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And can I first of all just congratulate Emma Roddick on bringing this. I think this is a much-needed debate, and we've spoken about that separately. And just to echo the points actually that have come from around the chamber, I think there is clearly anger, there is clearly frustration about some of the fires that are happening across Scotland. Where I think that I am hearing, if I'm right, is a consensus around, in terms of cross-party support, is around that need for action and actually what we can do. And I think I would personally be very happy to join any meeting, any roundtable that we could have with the Minister to discuss actually what that action could be. And I mean that in a positive way. The Minister doesn't think I do, but I genuinely do mean that in a positive way. In recent years, Scotland has witnessed a deeply concerning trend. The number and intensity of wildfires across our country is growing, and these fires are not isolated incidents. They are becoming more frequent, more destructive, and more dangerous for our people, our land, and our wildlife. And I've put some of that into numbers. Whilst wildlife figures, of course, vary year to year, the upward trend is stark. Between 2024 and the first half of 2025, the number of recorded wildfires more than tripled, from 55 in all of 2024 to 187 in just the first 6 months of this year. That is already higher than the highest figure since 2018, and we can safely assume the total for 2025 will rise further, as the data does not yet include the peak summer months of July and August. To put this into perspective, the 187 wildfires already recorded in 2025 are close to double the total for 2015, when 111 were recorded. The direction of travel is undeniable. Wildfires in Scotland are rising. The Highlands remain the most severely affected region by a very large margin. Over the past decade, 574 wildfires have been recorded. This is a Highland issue, and I do think it's important to say that, but it is also a national issue with consequences for all of Scotland. In Murray, too, the problem is clear. Multiple incidents this year alone underline the urgency of action that is required. That is why Murray Council, led by Councillor Kathleen Robertson and Councillor Derek Ross, became the first council to take action in Scotland, agreeing a motion in August that recognised the devastation caused by wildfires in the summer of 2025, committing to hold a wildfire summit to consider new bylaws and to seek funding from both governments, just as we already fund other climate-driven challenges such as flooding and coastal erosion. Presiding Officer, in recognising this trend, I do also want to, as my colleagues have done, recognise those who stand on the front line. I pay huge tribute to the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. Their professionalism and bravery in the most challenging of circumstances deserves the thanks of this Chamber and, in my opinion, the whole country. But equally, much of the immediate response came not from Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, but from those closest to the land. Gamekeepers, including our young gamekeepers, farmers, estate staff, local volunteers. In the late June wildfires alone, Scottish Land and Estates reported that 33 businesses, including 27 estates, provided vital assistance. Private land managers deployed equipment worth an estimated £3.1 million to contain the flames. These contributions were not optional, they were essential. Presiding Officer, wildfires put human lives in danger. They devastate habitats and wildlife. They damage farming, sporting estates and tourism, and they place immense strain on rural communities. This is why I urge everyone that during dry weather, caution is essential. A cigarette, a barbecue, even a spark from machinery can cause untold damage. The evidence, I think, is clear. The trends are undeniable, and I ask the Government to seriously look now at the threat we face. Scotland, in my opinion, needs a dedicated wildfire response unit with specialist training, modern equipment and, crucially, aerial firefighting support. This is how we will protect our communities, our land and our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Eagle. And I call Jackie Dunbar to be followed by Douglas Ross. Up to 4 minutes. Ms Dunbar.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I thank Emma Roddick for bringing this very important issue to Chamber today for debate. It's important to remember that wildfire risk exists across Scotland. Nowhere is immune, and that will only become more obvious as we experience more frequent extreme weather events. Aberdeen is already familiar with the Gramps and Tullis Hill going up in flames again this year, and almost all of Scotland was categorised as a high risk of wildfires in the summer months. A key difference when a fire takes hold in the city of Aberdeen compared to Davamore or elsewhere around the Highlands is that there is peat in the Highlands, which can continue burning for days, more often than not weeks. Land managers and gamekeepers know this. They know where the peat is and they know how to deal with it. I spend a lot of time in Emma Roddick's beautiful region, as well as rural Aberdeenshire, and I've seen for myself the expertise that exists within these roles. Sadly, it's an expertise that is often overlooked in a crisis, and that's to our detriment. However committed our fire brigade workers are, they will not know the ins and outs of what is happening with the ground, where the most flammable vegetation is and where the ground might be more resistant to catching, in the same way that someone who is out there every single day tending to it will. I support Emma Roddick's comments about ensuring the SFRS has the correct equipment available, but I do urge our vital emergency services personnel to consider the value of what land managers and gamekeepers have to offer in a crisis too. From knowing where natural fire breaks have been placed to being intimately aware of the most effective access points for emergency vehicles. Their input is not just nice to have, it is crucial for the fast action and fire resilience. This expertise is crucial in fire prevention as well as response. Knowledge of how to safely carry out muir burn and prevent build-up of dry vegetation is knowledge we cannot afford to lose. We hear a lot about muir burn when it comes to wildfire discussions carried out responsibly in accordance with the Muir Burn Code. It can be very effective in preventing wildfires from taking hold. I recognise that the Government is having to balance a lot of very important concerns when it comes to muir burn licensing, but I hope that consideration will be given to this issue and how best to support those carrying it out in any reviews of our wildfire policy. I welcome the cross-party nature of this debate and my colleagues' calls for a collective effort to find a way forward for wildfire prevention and effective response. But it will be incomplete without direct engagement with Scotland's gamekeepers, on-the-ground professionals whose knowledge can help us build the resilience we need in rural communities. Wildfires are a relevant issue to everyone in this country, and nowhere is immune from their risk, as Aberdeen knows. But the increased potential for wildfires in rural areas and their capacity for destroying livelihoods and natural environments that we in urban areas rely on, whether in a broad sense offsetting our carbon emissions and supporting biodiversity that our cities struggle to, or closer to home, getting food into our shops and onto our tables, should concern and provoke action from us all. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Ms Dunbar. And I call the final speaker in the open debate, Douglas Ross. Up to 4 minutes. Mr. Ross.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And can I also congratulate Emma Roddick for securing this debate? I have to say I don't agree with every single word in her motion, but I supported it because I wanted to make sure there was cross-party support so we could at least have this debate. Because over the summer I wrote to my friend and colleague Finlay Carson, as convener of the Rural Affairs Committee, asking that a committee of this Parliament look at this issue, because it is of such great importance, yes, to the Highlands, but I think to the rest of Scotland as well. Because what we witnessed in the early summer months was a horrific fire. I will not forget the scenes. I won't forget my kids' reaction when the sky just went extremely dark in the middle of the day. It was quite a terrifying experience for those of us who were many, many miles away, and I know how bad it was for people right at the centre of it. I have to say, on the day I wrote to the Justice Secretary in her role leading on resilience, asking for her to activate the Scottish Government's resilience room, and she refused to do that. But she did send me helpful updates, and I do appreciate that. I don't understand why the biggest wildfire ever in Scotland did not trigger the need for the Scottish Government's resilience room to be launched and opened. And I know the Minister was going to intervene on Fergus Ewing on that. I will give way to him if he wants to make the point now, or maybe in his closing remarks. But I do think that is an important point. And Ben McPherson mentioned the wildfire on Arthur's Seat, and that was serious. But that got an immediate response from the First Minister. He was tweeting about it within minutes or hours. We got nothing from the First Minister of Scotland when the biggest ever wildfire was affecting our communities in the north. And I hope that's something the Government will reflect on, because our words mean a lot, and I was quite surprised that the Government was silent on that issue. The ones who weren't silent and the ones who weren't standing back were the firefighters, the gamekeepers, the farm labourers and the estate workers. And let's be very clear, it was a horrendous wildfire that was threatening to get out of control. It was only brought under control because of their incredible efforts and because of Mother Nature. Because we had one of the biggest rainstorms I can remember, and the relief was palpable in Murray and the Highlands on that day, because I was worried the wildfire was going to go out of control. I'll give way to Fergus Ewing. Fergus Ewing, briefly.
I'm most grateful. Would Mr Ross agree that with one keeper who told me that the fire would have reached Granton and people would have died had it not been for muirburn carried out in past years in Muckrock Estate?
Douglas Ross.
Yes, I agree, because I've heard that myself as well. Over the summer, I met with representatives and owners of Murray Estates, and they're probably one of the biggest estates to be affected by this. And to see the scale of devastation for the work they have put into that area for so long is quite frankly heartbreaking. We were extremely lucky that no lives were lost, but we lost so much work that has been done to our peatlands, to our woodlands over many, many years. Perhaps 30 years to develop them, and that was all lost in these fires. So I do want to see a better response from the Scottish Government. I agree with Edward Mountain's point about assets. I was perhaps naive. I assumed the Scottish Government and the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service had the assets, such as helicopters, to come in to put water on these wildfires. I just always assumed that was a Government or Fire and Rescue Service asset. It wasn't. It was because these estates are spending a lot of money on insurance that they can then afford to take in these helicopters themselves. If it wasn't for that, we would have been in an even worse state. Finally, I want to say, not a wildfire. We have been experiencing too many deliberate fires in Murray. In Lossiemouth, there has been a spate of them that have been worrying close to homes and individuals. One young person is now has been arrested and charged. I would say, since the Minister for Community Safety is here, I want to see tougher punishments for people who willfully set fires because of the damage they do. Thank you. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Mr Ross, and can I thank all members for their cooperation that has allowed me to get all members an equal opportunity to participate in a heavily subscribed debate. So thank you very much indeed. And with that, I call the Minister to respond to the debate. Around 7 minutes. Minister.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. And I'd very much like to thank Emma Roddick for bringing forward this extremely important members' business debate. And I'm going to try and touch on some of the points that she has made. The increasing frequency and intensity of wildfires in Scotland is not just a seasonal hazard. It is a stark warning to all of us. These fires are placing immense pressure on our rural communities and our emergency services. They're devastating our landscapes, threatening our biodiversity and our rural livelihoods and damaging critical infrastructure. And all of those points have been well made by a number of colleagues across the chamber. Finlay Carson talked about the collaboration of keepers, noted that excellent collaboration of farmers and keepers, and he's absolutely correct. This fire would not have been brought under control without the sterling effort of all of the land managers and land workers who were there, making sure that they got that fire under control. But he did talk about cuts to the fire service, as does, I'm sorry, the Labour member, her name's gone out of my head. There was no cuts to the service delivery. The service delivery view is not cuts. There's no decisions have been made. SFRS have said that if they had an unlimited budget, they would still be carrying out this review. So it isn't actually cuts that they're talking about. Emma Harper, she mentioned sky lanterns. Unfortunately, sky lanterns are becoming fashionable again. So I would add my voice to hers to please ask people, do not use sky lanterns, because not only will they choke livestock, they are also potential areas of burning that could lead to wildfires. Fergus Ewing, and I would like to thank him for the phone call that he gave to me on the 29th of June. The fire started on the 28th. Fergus Ewing phoned me on the 29th, and I greatly appreciate the fact that he did so. So what happened then? He did ask me to establish SCORE. It wasn't my gift to establish SCORE at that time, but I was given clear guidance and understanding from the Cabinet Secretary it wasn't needed because there were local resilience groups who were already set up. So what happened in that process? I phoned Angela Constance, I phoned Richard Lochhead, I phoned the Deputy First Minister, I phoned the National Farmers Union of Scotland, I phoned the Scottish Land and Estates, I phoned the Scottish Gamekeepers Association. And I did all of these things immediately to find out what the position was from people who were on the ground actually dealing with the fire at that time. I then attended the game. I had a holiday in the 3 weeks leading to my visit to Davamoor. No, I will not. I attended the game fair the week after I came back in order to speak to young keepers, in order to get their perception of what had actually happened. I then attended the site with the keepers who were on site at the time, with the Cairngorms National Park, with NatureScot, with officials from SFRS and other locals. And we then went on and had other meetings. I've since met with SGA, SLE, RSPB and the Cairngorms National Park. So it was really cheap politics when Tim Eagle sat on the BBC and said I was turning up for a photo op. When we're talking about cooperation, if we're going to have cooperation, that kind of childish politics really has to be taken out of the... No, I'll be taking no interventions from any of you. So we went. So what happened after that? What will be happening as we go forward? 25th of September, there will be an SFRS series of debriefs on the 25th of September. The Scottish Multi-Agency Training Exercise Unit will have a debrief on the 1st of October. The public sector will have a debrief on the 9th of October, and then there will be a stakeholders meeting on October the 14th, including myself and the Cabinet Secretary. So, Emma, one of the other things that Emma Roddick talked about was the bylaws in order to prevent people from selling, using or buying barbecues. And I get that that is something that we're looking at. Cairngorms National Park, we've got the bylaws sitting with the Minister, and I absolutely accept the fact that that is something that should be looked at. But there are legal considerations that we have to take into account. That's one of the serious things that you have to do when you're in government. As far as the helicopters are concerned, I absolutely share the concerns of people that we didn't have the ability to be able to call on helicopters right there and then. And that is one of the things that we will be considering as we go forward. Emma Roddick.
Emma Roddick, briefly.
Can I press the Minister on that point around legal considerations? Could he lay out what exactly those legal considerations are? Because there is conflicting information out there and people have the right to be able to scrutinise these reasons and push for action, which is badly needed.
Minister.
The point that Emma Roddick makes, we will get to all of these points as we go through the process of all the reviews that I have laid out to the Chamber today. As far as the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, their equipment, we've announced a £1.6 million funding package that is going to go to providing the equipment that is needed, the fogging units, the ATVs, the vehicles to be able to get them there, the trailers to get the vehicles to the sites. So those things are in train. It's all part of the process that is being dealt with at this moment. And I'm making that point because we absolutely take every single bit of this very, very seriously. Wildfire is a danger, it's present, it's here right now, and we have to make sure we've got the resilience in place. Ariane Burgess talks about the ability to be able to manage wildfire through landscape management. And she's correct to a certain extent. But every single type of landscape in the area was burnt through. Didn't matter whether it was managed moors, it was moorland, whether it was wetland, whether it was rewilded land. Every single bit of that land was burnt through by that wildfire because it couldn't get control. But the one point that I will agree with Douglas Ross on is that had it not been for the keepers that were on the ground, they wouldn't have stopped it when they did. That and a great big plout of rain. The local resilience group was set up. Going back to another point that Fergus Ewing made, locals were being contacted by the local resilience group, as far as I am aware. If that is something that we have to look at, how we get information to local people, I'm absolutely prepared to take that away in the discussions that we have going forward. So the actions that we will take as government, I'm going to lay out. I've already laid out what was done. I am still working with organisations to make sure that we get this right. That will be Scottish Land and Estates, it will be the Scottish Gamekeepers Association, it will be NFU, it will be Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. All of these organisations will be in the room so that we can have those conversations. So we'll be having those summits. We're going to have a better relationship with our keepers. I am determined that I rebuild that relationship with our keepers and our land managers in order to make sure we've got that cooperation. And I would like to put on record my thanks to every single one of them, the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, and for everybody else who came out and helped with those fires. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes the debate. Again, thanks to members for their cooperation, allowing the debate to be concluded with everybody getting a chance to participate and allow time for parliamentary staff to prepare the chamber for this afternoon's business. And with that, I suspend the business briefly until 2 p.m.